Actually, I'm not sorry.
Kojo besia, everyone will fear. Supi supi, everyone will fear. Trumu trumu, everyone will fear. Wow, everyone will fear.
I learned humanity through food, and I learned love through food. Hi, my name is Zandile, and this is For the Culture. Dun, 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 dun. Holding my little bouquet of flowers. The irony of my food journey is that I hated cooking. Up until, goodness, varsity. When I started varsity, I studied chemical engineering, which was amazing until I got bored. And I decided to be, during the time I was vegetarian and there wasn't enough offer, in varsity space for vegetarian people. So I started making little meals for myself in my little dorm, trying to figure how I could excite myself a bit more outside of the mashed potato and cheese and pasta, because I don't like any of them. And I sort of realized I enjoy, creating food and working with little bits of food. So I then dropped out of engineering, which is not great. And I think it really broke my grandmom's heart. But I managed to convince them and make them see that I was actually considering food from a science perspective and a science, lens. So I then went on into the consumer science department where I got accepted, and I think I got into everyone's good books because my grandmother, was the one who actually bought me my first toolkit, which is where you have all your knives and your spoons and just every culinary piece that you need to start your practicals. And I was so excited to go home during the Easter break to tell my grandmother and make her my first proper meal, because she hadn't had any food cooked by me. And when I got home, I learned that my grandmother had passed away. It did feel like a missed opportunity, because food for me has always been very central to the relationship I have with her. Because for the most part in my upbringing, she wasn't working. So we'd always spend a lot of time either sitting outside, sorting beans or, snapping greens or something along those lines. I think my grandmother was pivotal in the way food has shifted for me and the way my love for food has evolved, because it went from just looking at food from a science perspective to looking at food from how it raised me and how it raised my mom and how it raised her mom. Even in the way my grandmother communicated and how people joined the community. I actually have so much of my story embedded in community around food. So be it mokete at home where we are welcoming a child, or it's a passing of someone, or it's a wedding, there's always people from the community who come and we all prepare the food together. But I didn't realize I was learning all of these things until I worked with food from such an isolated scientific way, where I started realizing that people don't actually look at the human, of food. I had a practical in my third year, which is where you get to choose a cuisine and, invite 45 people. And I called mine Mosotho in the City because, again, Mosotho, and I was in Pretoria, so I was trying to embrace that. And I made a menu specifically dedicated to my grandmother. So from start till end, it was like a Sunday at her house. So the starter was moroho with mugogu, pumpkin. And when we got to the mains, I made stamp cakes. So stamp was a big part of my upbringing, which I didn't realize how much I loved it or why I loved it so much until I was making those cakes. And then I started realizing my grandmother used to buy mealies and take them off the cob. And then she had these grinding stones, and then she would like sit there and grind them and tell me stories and like folklore. I also made a dish called why is the name
Chodlo.
Chodlo? So I made chodlo, which horrified everyone in the kitchen. Because again, European food has a specific look, a specific feel, and I was telling everyone we will cook that meat until it looks like it does not want to exist anymore. And I made chakalaka and, beetroot, because again, 7 colors. And then I love fermented fruits, made gemere. And then for the dessert, I remember I made ice cream with amasi and poached peaches, because we used to can peaches at home. And then just like a ginger sponge, because again, bringing those flavors from home. But again, the whole menu was just to honor my grandmother. I felt if I couldn't make her a meal, I'd make everyone else eat a meal that was for her. And while everyone else was enjoying the meal, in the back of the kitchen, everyone was hating the fact that they could smell gemere, that fermentation, which threw me off because I didn't like the way our food was perceived always as this disgusting other, just because people weren't sensorily, aware of it or sensorily experienced to it. So I became stubborn and I decided that I was going to make sure everyone eats the food that I grew up on all the time, as much as I could. So when we had another opportunity for me to have a paid dinner, started making sure I added ingredients and elements that I grew up on and food that people would consider poverty food, but just elevating it in a way that I was basically playing in their face that, you can have this, if it was French, you can have this as I presented. And when we did a product development assignment, I decided to honor sorghum because I grew up with sorghum. And I also felt a lot of people who didn't necessarily have access to the grain didn't know its capabilities. And it has such incredible powers and strength in how it delivers, and it's very versatile. And in this dinner, 80% of that menu was harvested. And the menu itself was a 6-course meal. And I made motoho. I made the tlhabegoe ya ting to make mabele a ting, like the proper stiff one. And again, everyone hated me. Like in the kitchen, they couldn't stand that smell, which for me is love. Like my grandmother, if I walked into the house and I smelled that, I knew either maheu, a thing in the fridge, or I knew that, there was some porridge happening on the stove. So I was really excited and I presented this menu, and the honorary guest was this professor from America. And that was actually his favorite component of the meal. Of the entire meal. There was macarons on that meal. There was, your sous vide, kudu. There was all these different fancy terms and different methods used to highlight different ingredients, indigenous, yes, but the most simple thing was his favorite.
Okay, next question. Why is it important that your food reflects who you are?
I think there's some sort of beauty in being seen and seeing yourself in the food that you eat.
So I like making food that makes me feel like I'm the main character, even if it's like shifts and changes made to food that actually has been, developed by another cuisine. But if I have to add my own twist, then I want to make sure that I feel like getting us there, Yeah. I struggled a lot with trying to present my food For my practicals, because I would be told the source is unverified, because it's not in a culinary book. And I think my saving grace with regards to the Ding was when Les the Chef, Leseho released Dijon, where he had a Ding recipe, and I could go here on the measurements and sort of work from there. Because as much as I could say, this is what I grew up on, this is the recipe, it was not accepted. And even when we did an African sort of spread, where we did different African foods from different, countries and all of that, just the aversion to our food from people who've never tasted it was a bit jarring. So I started highlighting more on sorghum and showing people how to use it beyond what you grew up with, and how we can actually start telling our food stories a bit better through, for me, it's a grain. For someone else, it might be something else. So I started making biscuits and muffins and cookies and nachos and cake, salads. So the Sorghum Agenda won an award. That award was as much a surprise for me as it was for anyone else. So Food XX is a platform that highlights women in food, as well as, the different aspects of the food industry that wouldn't necessarily get a platform in just a restaurant award. So it goes beyond restaurant awards. It looks at people who make wines, and looks at people who make confectionery and farmers and all these different elements of food, professionals. So I won for what they call the Secret Ingredient Award. Very exciting moment for me, because it's definitely opened so much more connections, and it's definitely broadened the agenda beyond, what I saw it to be. I didn't start the Sorghum Agenda for a professional standpoint. I didn't start it as this is what I want to do, this is the end goal. It started off as just me sharing food and me sharing the story of the food and how it relates to me. So to be able to be myself and engage with food how I want and still get seen for that, that's amazing. So now I work as a product developer, which is super amazing, and I get to play around and make breads and develop cakes and desserts. And I get to see them on shelf in, people's favorite retailers. And I think it's amazing to be able to take my mom to a store and be like, I did that. So I love my job, and while I do that on the side, I spend my time pushing the Sorghum Agenda and, bullying people to eat more sorghum.
Actually, I'm not sorry.